Hey everyone, welcome back to TechBit Academy. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel.
Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down the complete roadmap for bringing literally any project to life. I mean, whether you're building a massive piece of enterprise software, constructing a skyscraper, or, even just organizing a neighborhood block party, there's a fundamental underlying structure that guarantees things actually get done. And today, we're going to absolutely demystify that entire structure.
Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty steps, let's just get our foundational definition out of the way. What exactly are project management process groups? Well, these aren't just some abstract philosophical ideas that sit in a textbook. They are highly practical, hands-on management activities applied throughout a project to make sure it actually succeeds from start to finish. And just so we're all on the same page here, this framework is formally defined by the Project Management Institute, or PMI. They're essentially the global gold standard for how professional project managers organize their entire workload.
So here's our literal map for today's explainer, charting the journey from an idea's birth to its final delivery. We'll look at the project lifecycle roadmap and then the 5 distinct phases: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and finally closing.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the Project Lifecycle Roadmap.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how it visualizes the complete project lifecycle as this 5-stage chronological journey. And here's the thing, you really can't skip these steps. You start with initiating, you move right into planning, then roll up your sleeves for execution, keep everything strictly in check with monitoring and controlling, and finally tie it all up in closing. It's just this beautifully logical flow of activities.
Moving on to Section 2, the very first mile marker on our roadmap, initiating, which is all about defining the idea.
This is the exact moment where the project is officially born. Let's act as a bit of a translator here, showing how these formal management frameworks perfectly mirror practical development terms. The formal PMI, Initiating Process Group, perfectly reflects what developers simply call requirement analysis. Different words, sure, but it's the exact same fundamental goal.
So, what are the actual core tasks required to get a project off the ground before any real building begins? Well, first, you absolutely have to clearly define the project idea. Then, you need to identify your stakeholders, who actually cares about this project, and honestly, who's paying for it. Next up, you create a project charter. Think of this as the official document that authorizes the whole shebang. Essentially, you're formally starting the project and strictly defining its boundaries. You're pouring the foundation here.
All right, on to Section 3, planning, designing the project.
Let's see how this builds. Now that we actually know what we're doing, we have to figure out exactly how to pull it off. In development terminology, this planning process is exactly your design phase. You're architecting the actual solution. In this absolutely critical planning phase, you decide the exact methods for how the project's going to be done. You lock in the scope, making sure you know exactly what is included and maybe more importantly, what is excluded. You create a timeline and a realistic schedule. You look closely at the budget to estimate costs. And this is a big one. You identify risks. You have to sit down and ask yourself, okay, what could possibly go wrong here and how are we going to handle it when it does?
So, the crucial point to take away here is that all this conceptual planning results in a tangible output. You don't just walk away from the table with good intentions, you walk away with the project management plan. It's the comprehensive, formally approved business blueprint that everyone commits to right before the heavy lifting actually begins.
Which brings us to Section 4, executing, doing the actual work.
Okay, we are finally moving off the whiteboard here. Executing is simply the formal PMI term for the hands-on development phase where the product is actively built. Whether you're, writing lines of code, pouring actual concrete, or designing graphics, execution is development. It's the kinetic, active state of actually building the thing. This is exactly where the vast bulk of the project's energy goes. You do the actual work. You develop the product. But remember, execution isn't just heads-down labor. You've got to actively manage your team and maintain constant, clear communication with your stakeholders. You're building the product for sure, but you are also actively coordinating the human beings who are doing that building.
And what's the immediate reward for all this intense execution? A real working product. This is a massive milestone. Now, it might not be a perfectly polished gem just yet, but the output of the executing phase is something tangible.
it actually functions. Next up is Section 5, Monitoring, Tracking and Fixing.
Now, it is so vital to understand that this phase runs constantly alongside execution to keep everything strictly on the rails. It doesn't just happen at the very end. This brilliantly illustrates how the formal monitoring and controlling process group perfectly reflects a developer's testing and quality control phase. It's all about ensuring the thing you just built actually works the way you promised it would.
The core balancing act of this entire phase is continuous comparison. You are constantly weighing your actual progress, meaning what your team has actually built today, against your planned progress, that initial blueprint you created way back in the planning phase. You're looking for the gap. Where do those two things diverge?
Because when they do diverge, you have to take action. You track the progress, and you fix problems the absolute second they arise. You actively manage inevitable changes, because let's be real, no project ever goes 100% according to the original plan. And through it all, you strictly control the quality. You are essentially acting as the project's immune system, constantly fighting off scope creep, weird bugs, and unexpected delays.
Finally, we reach Section 6, Closing, Delivering the Final Product.
As we kind of slow our pace here and approach the final destination of our roadmap, we hit our final translation. Officially closing a project in PMI terms is the exact same concept as deployment in development terms. It is time to push it live and actually get it out the door.
Practically speaking, this means finishing the project officially and formally. You deliver the final product to the client or to the public. This involves, handing over the documentation, releasing your team members to go tackle new projects, and formally declaring that the work you set out to do is now complete. You've officially crossed the finish line.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Is a project truly a success if it fails the transition from actual work to final delivery? Think about it. You could execute beautifully and build an absolute masterpiece of a working product. But if you don't properly manage the closing and deployment, that value is literally never realized. This reinforces exactly why applying these PMI process groups from the very first spark of an idea all the way to a structured formal closing matters so incredibly much. It really is the only way to ensure your great ideas actually make it out into the real world. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.